From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Carla Gonzalez, and this is From the South. The first video of a U.S. migrant detention facility in McAllen, Texas, has been released and is causing worldwide outrage. The video was released to a group of journalists who took part on a media trip to the detention center last week. The journalists were not allowed to record any audio or video of their own. In the last 6 weeks, more than 2,000 children have been separated from their parents in their attempts to enter the United States. Most of the children come from Honduras and El Salvador. U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions introduced a zero-tolerance immigration policy in April. President Donald Trump has refuted all the criticism and in turn blamed Democrats for the situation. He also emphasized migrants are not welcome in the country.
The United States will not be a migrant camp, and it will not be a refugee holding facility. Won't be. You look at what's happening in Europe, you look at what's happening in other places, we can't allow that to happen to the United States, not on my watch.
U.S. media outlet ProPublica published an audio clip of children separated from their parents at an unidentified detention center in the United States. It was recorded by a person from the center who asked for anonymity. The children are believed to be between the ages of 4 and 10. Unable to understand what's happening to them, they are heard crying and pleading to the patrol agent to let them go back to their parents.
¿De dónde son ustedes? ¿Y tú?
Guatemala. Papá. Voy a llamarme a mi tía para que me venga a recoger. Ay, no, y después para que llegue mi mami lo más pronto posible. No, primero con papá. Primero con papá.
The government of El Salvador has warned that the policy puts children's health at risk and could cause psychosocial scars. El Salvador's foreign ministry said in a statement that the Trump administration's hardline policy of separating immigrant parents and children violated human rights and strongly urged for an end to the practice. In other stories, the New York Stock Exchange has fallen in early trading as fears mount of a global trade war. Earlier markets dropped sharply across Asia and Europe after U.S. President Donald Trump threatened to impose tariffs on an additional $200 billion worth of goods from China. The Dow Jones lost 300 points, wiping out gains made this year. China said it didn't want a trade war but would respond to the threats. Earlier, we spoke with Indian economist and journalist Madhavan Narayanan to learn more about the repercussions of the latest move and what it means for the world's two biggest economies.
The fact is that China holds billions of dollars of treasury bonds that are U.S. treasury bonds. So there is more to this than simple trade. So the Chinese are on the one hand trying to retaliate with some counter tariff measures that will hurt the U.S., but it can also hurt the U.S. by pulling out dollars from U.S. bonds and doing other stuff that only the Chinese are capable of, because China doesn't take anything lying down. So it is a tough time.
Argentina's stock market also plunged by 6.5% on Monday, driven by sharp declines in prices for energy and bank shares. This comes after a number of high-level government changes over the weekend, including replacements for both the energy and production ministers. As President Mauricio Macri reshuffled his cabinet to address Argentina's economic crisis, unions and social movements continue to demonstrate against his neoliberal policies.
The government of Argentina is looking to get out of the economic crisis by reshuffling Mauricio Macri's cabinet. The currency exchange rate is out of control, and observers warn that following the continued rise of the dollar, the annual inflation rate is on track to reach 24 or 25%.
Until there is drastic change, the results will be the same, economically speaking. Right now they are just playing with the government's funds in what is called financial speculation. I don't think there will be any changes anytime soon that will benefit the people.
To avoid the ongoing devaluation of the peso against the dollar, the central bank attempted to carry out a set of preventive measures. Any setback to these would deepen the current crisis and, as a direct result, lead to more inflation.
It's like sitting inside of a pressure cooker, waiting to explode. It's a very hard situation for a lot of people, for the middle class, for the working class, and it's really going to explode upon everyone over the next few years.
It seems as if the fate of the current economic plan depends on the International Monetary Fund. A steep decrease in consumption by consumers has caused 7,000 medium and small-sized companies to close down and 75,000 people to lose their jobs in the industrial sector.
The government says that workers' salaries are too high, and that's why they need to change labor standards. It's all about the salaries to them.
In the midst of this economic turmoil, workers' unions have had enough, and they warn that the main problem doesn't just rely only on a decrease in consumption and production, but in the implemented measures that will ultimately increase poverty and strip workers' rights.
For the first time, the murder of a trans person in Argentina has been ruled a hate crime, a milestone verdict in the country. The killer, Gabriel Marino, was sentenced to life in prison after Marino killed a trans activist, Diana Zacayán, back in 2015, stabbing her 13 times. The World Health Organization also made an historic decision on Monday by removing transsexuality off its list of mental disorders. In the new update of the International Classification of Diseases, transsexuality has become part of a new heading called Conditions Relating to Sexual Health, and now it is called Gender Incongruence. LGBTI groups celebrate the decision, although they ask for the trans condition to be considered part of human diversity instead of an incongruence. We'll take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. In Nicaragua, the national dialogue is on hold as opposition groups are demanding President Daniel Ortega invites international organizations as observers in order to resume talks. The opposition wants the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and the European Union to oversee the dialogue process. But the government insists on the need to put an end on violence in the streets. Local TV station Canal 4 reported that vandal groups burnt down the headquarters of Blue Nicaragua, an events company in Managua, on Monday. It's been 2 months since protests started in Nicaragua and has left over 150 people killed, according to unofficial figures. A court in Ecuador is moving forward with its attempts to indict former President Rafael Correa, adding to the indignation of his supporters and the Citizen Revolution Party.
Judge Daniela Camacho links former President Rafael Correa to the alleged kidnapping of the ex-lawmaker Fernando Balda back in 2013. The judge has ordered Rafael Correa to appear before the court every 15 days, while also approving protective measures for Balda and his family.
We will have to prove his guilt. They shouldn't complain about political persecution since there is extensive documentation that points to a state crime.
Correa's defense team joined with the members of the Citizen Revolution movement, saying they rejected this decision taken by the court and that they will appeal this resolution.
There is nothing here but wild speculation and prejudices. There is no proof of criminal responsibility.
During the hearing, Correa's supporters and members of the Citizen Revolution movement gathered outside the court in support to the former president.
Rafael Correa had no involvement in that case, but let's not forget there is a political witch hunt going on against those who changed our country for the better.
As events stand, former President Rafael Correa will have to appear before the court on July 2nd, and his defense will have 30 days to present their arguments to prove the innocence of the former president. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
Colombia remains divided after new President Iván Duque was elected on Sunday's runoff, as his supporters are hopeful that the coming cabinet will be effective. The presidential election outcome on one side is hopeful for the new President Duque, but on the other is disappointed on how close Gustavo Petro was to take office. Duque's voters are positive on the new administration policies, especially regarding economy and security. But former presidential candidate Petro is concerned about the correct implementation of the peace agreement with the FARC, signed with the government in 2016. Petro's supporters think Colombia lost a chance for real change in this election. Conservative Duque beat his leftist rival with 12 points. We spoke to independent journalist Richard McCall about the status of the FARC peace accord and how Iván Duque will move to change it. We also talked about what might be in store for a Congress made up of new members from the FARC versus the traditional conservative sectors.
Iván Duque, in the early days of the elections, had said he would shred the peace accord. Of course, the peace accord, which was signed in 2016 with the FARC guerrillas and the government of Juan Manuel Santos, bringing to an end more than 50-odd years of conflict. He said he'd shred it, but in recent weeks leading up to the runoff of the elections, which happened on Sunday night, he softened his tone, saying that he wants to revisit and restructure certain parts of it. What he said in his opening speech as president-elect is that he wants the peace accord to address the victims and the victims' rights. I don't think he can possibly tear up the peace accord like he once threatened. What he'll do is he'll starve it. He won't act so fast on it, maybe not pay certain sectors of it, which will have the same effect. It will run it into the ground, but he could then say that he's done everything in his power to keep it alive. But at the same time, it's a very tough and tricky moment for Colombia.
Controversy is mounting in Mexico after the government removes the legal veto that banned companies from privatizing and extracting water from over 300 watersheds in the country. This concession could mean the privatization of 55% of Mexico's surface water in favor of transnational companies. Social movements denounce that President Enrique Peña Nieto's decree is aimed at transforming a basic common good into a commodity. The new rule also allows companies to extract water and use it for fracking. On the other hand, the Mexican government made a public statement denying the privatization and saying that the goal is to guarantee water for future generations. Teachers in Peru continue their indefinite strike to urge for better salaries, a bigger education budget, and the improvement of their labor conditions. One teachers' union called for the strike, which is currently undergoing in the main Peruvian cities and departments in the country. The Ministry of Education threatened to discount this time from their salaries and to replace the teachers if the protests reach a third day of work absence.
At the beginning of the academic year, only 25% of the schools were classified as suitable. Can you believe that? Over 75% of schools are at risk. They say they are worried about children, but the truth is they are totally abandoned by the authorities.
They are proving their weakness and their lack of capacity to solve issues. They are trying to thrive or fight, but we, on the contrary, are getting stronger.
Thousands of people are said to still be missing after Guatemala's Fuego volcano erupted 2 weeks ago. Let's go to our correspondent Mario Rosales with all the details.
Hola, ¿qué tal, compañeros? Un saludo hasta...
In Guatemala, the National Coordinator for Disasters, CONRED, has declared San Miguel Los Lotes and El Rodeo as restricted areas. Nobody can enter this location close to the Fuego volcano. It has also been declared as a high-risk area due to the activity of the volcano that continues to give off eruptions. The Institute of Volcanology said that there are between 7 and 9 small eruptions per hour. This has caused volcanic waste to descend from the Fuego volcano crater. It's been 2 weeks since the tragedy, and the big question is how many people are still buried. The Guatemalan government says that 100 people died and 197 are still missing. But the people, social organizations, and the victims' families say that there are thousands of people buried. This is why they disagree with the declaration of this zone as disabled. The victims are also demanding housing because they don't want to stay in shelters any longer.
That was Mario Rosales. Bolivian President Evo Morales met with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping to discuss the bilateral relations between the two countries. Bolivian exports such as coffee, meat, and soy were one of the main topics in the agenda. Chinese officials said the country appreciates Bolivia's adherence to the One China policy and its active involvement on the Belt and Road Initiative. During a reception in Beijing, Morales gave Xi a translated copy of the Book of the Sea, which describes Bolivian claims over access to the Pacific Ocean, currently in litigation at the International Court of Justice. A group of female students submitted a proposal at the University of Chile to end with sexism. The 16-page petition was delivered to the head of the university, Ennio Vivaldi. The students are asking for clear protocols to end with sexism, the end of sexist education, and for women to have more participation on campus. The document was also shared with university students, professors, and other officials.
This is an historical process not only because of the content of the request, but also because of the way it was done. We created a women's assembly. During our first session, over 1,000 women attended. We wanted to hear different voices, so our movement is representing all women.
This is the right time for this movement to grow. I think there is a common conscience in our society regarding social inequality. There is a will to put a stop to sexism. We have to fully achieve women's rights, and that means to push for a cultural change that also has to start within campus.
We'll take one final short break, but join us after another video from our multimedia team. Now for a World Cup update. Japan has beaten Colombia 2-1 in the first match of the day at the Russia World Cup. Shinji Kagawa scored a penalty in the 5th minute of the game. Colombia scored in the 39th minute with a goal by Juan Fernando Quintero, but Yuya Osako scored the winning goal for Japan in the 73rd minute. In another match, Poland, which is facing Senegal, has scored an own goal at the 38th minute, giving lead to the Senegalese team by 1-0. Later in the day, Russia will play against Egypt. Former President of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, made his debut as World Cup TV commentator for Sao Paulo-based VTV network. Lula commented on the match that his country played against Switzerland on Sunday. He highlighted that playing in the World Cup is not the same as a friendly match, and said Brazil succumbed to pressure. Two things are clear during the World Cup, he said. Germany is not undefeatable, and Cristiano Ronaldo is a crack. Moving to world news, the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is making a 2-day visit to Beijing just a week after his historic meeting with the U.S. President Donald Trump. China has sought to strengthen its role as a mediator between the U.S. and North Korea, where China has sizable security and economic interests. The streets around Beijing's Diaoyutai State Guest House, where Kim Jong-un is staying, is filled with heavy security and armored vehicles. Our correspondent Isaura Diaz has the latest from Beijing.
China's media outlets have announced the visit of the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. The Chinese foreign minister said the 2-day visit will help bilateral relations between the two countries. It's the first time Chinese media have reported on a visit by Kim Jong-un while he's still in the country. It's also interesting that his visit comes just a week after he met with US President Donald Trump in Singapore. There's speculation that this visit will centre on the details of Kim and Trump's historic summit. China is North Korea's most important ally in the region. More than 90% of North Korea's foreign commerce is with China. In the last 3 months, Kim Jong-un has visited China on 3 occasions, proving that both countries are working closely.
That was Isaura Diaz from Beijing. A group of people were rescued aboard a sinking ferry in a popular tourist destination in Indonesia. Let's take a look at that and other stories from around the world.
Indonesian authorities have rescued 18 people on board a sinking ferry carrying at least 80 passengers in Lake Toba, a popular tourist area in North Sumatra. 1 passenger was affected by the weather conditions and confirmed dead. 2 other ferries and a wooden boat were involved in the rescue effort. Lake Toba is filled by a giant dormant volcano and is one of the deepest in the world. China has welcomed France to join its One Belt and One Road initiative after the European nation expressed interest in the development strategy. At a regular briefing in Beijing on Tuesday, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Geng Shuang told reporters that the French Senate's report over the Chinese initiative, aiming to promote policy coordination, trade, and financial integration, has been noted. He added that the initiative is geared towards inclusion.
We're ready to work with European countries, France included, to discuss specific ways to cooperate within the framework of the One Belt and One Road initiative, in order to coordinate our development strategies and expand shared interests so as to secure a higher level of mutual benefit.
1 man has died and 4 others were injured in a shooting outside an internet cafe in Malmö, Sweden on Monday evening. Witnesses say 15 to 20 shots were fired in quick succession, and people were then seen loaded wounded men onto private vehicles. The area is currently sealed off while the investigations continue. The police say they are treating the incident as murder and attempted murder.
It's been 6 years since WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange was given refuge in Ecuadorian embassy in London. 46-year-old Assange entered the embassy evading arrest over sexual assault charges by the Swedish government, which were later dropped. But the software programmer still faces espionage and criminal investigations by the US government over the release of thousands of classified documents related to the government and the army. He could face extradition to the US if he steps out of the Ecuadorian embassy in the UK. And before we end today's show, a reminder that you can watch our special World Cup program with Diego Armando Maradona. De la Mano del 10, the World Cup, according to Maradona, will air only on Telesur every night at these times, daily during the World Cup in Russia, so be sure to tune in. And with that, we come to the end of this news brief. But this and other stories, as you know, you can find on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And be sure to also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.
Enjoy our programming from Monday to Friday, where you'll find the best information on innovation, conservation, human well-being, and human rights. Keep up to date on the latest innovations in science and technology with Atomun. The habits and knowledge you need to live a healthy lifestyle are on Guide Your Body. Environmental consciousness is required to preserve our Earth. Undergo your transformation on Green Zone. We defend the struggles of peoples in resistance fighting for their rights. Between Borders. All about equity, diversity, and respect for identity on By Gender. Every day we feature a wide variety of content. Only on Telesur, the news source from Latin America and the Caribbean.